What's up everyone, it's Endymion, and I was planning on covering something else to do in modern gaming. But the Baldur's Gate news is like the Italian mafia at this point. Every time I think I'm in the clear and I've put it behind me, they find a way to bring me back in. This time it looks like Baldur's Gate has triggered another side of the internet. The soft, low-key racist side that looks to victimize themselves whenever possible. And now some websites are echoing this sentiment. And later on, I'll also talk about how the game is now sexist as well. Don't you love the internet? Let's get started. This all began when a Twitter user named Elise decided to post a long thread on Twitter about playing a Tiefling in Baldur's Gate. For those unaware, Tieflings are like humanoid demon people. Basically, they look like humans, but they got sick horns and cool looking eyes. This person goes on to say, and I quote, "The racism in Baldur's Gate is genuinely so hard on me. Playing a Tiefling as a black person is brutal. Your party members antagonize you, the game antagonizes you. And the plot positions you as the bad guy if you don't help the druids calling you slurs. Like if I don't help the druid who is going to execute a child of my race for being of my race, I lose access to Karlach. I save the druids and they insinuate I'm a disease. If I fail the druid quest, a massacre of my people is on my hands. What the hell? I come home from a long day of microaggressions and masking and then my guard is immediately back up. I should be stressed that I'm making bad decisions. Not because Lae'zel keeps threatening to kill me in my sleep for having horns, and for white players, this is just fantasy. Tieflings, orcs, goblins, and drow are heavily steeped in racist, bio-essentialist lore. Attaching intrinsic morality to race is not creative. I don't blame Larian for that, it's not their lore. But there are far more interesting conflicts that have nothing to do with race. Like, y'all really don't see the problem with a devil did something evil and so all its descendants for the rest of time are evil. You don't see the problem with categorizing a large swath of people as evil and calling them pejoratives based on their appearance or heritage. And don't play a Tiefling drow isn't a solution. I challenge y'all to be brave enough to critique the media you consume. Critiquing something isn't the same as condemning it. I know I've pointed out something specific and right here because overwhelmingly people of color are speaking up. It's not bad faith to ask why people of color don't get the same level playing field in media. From character creators to stereotypes to in-game parallels to our real trauma, we are constantly misrepresented. Meaningful depictions of race are equal to forcing people of color to relive trauma without consent." End quote. There is so much to unpack here, and really what's being said is laughably on brand for the year that is 2023. I love how there's this group of players, journalists, developers, and whatever else that when they see something inhuman, suddenly in their brain, without anyone telling them otherwise, they immediately come to the conclusion that it's about people of color. I have never once looked at an orc or demon in a video game and immediately thought, ah yes, these are fantasy black people or something. I do agree that fantasy races do have influences from the real world, because of course they do. For example, in the Dragon Age series, we have the massive horned giants known as the Qunari. They are sort of dragons meet humanoids in terms of lore, and they live by a sacred text called the Qun. Anyone who follows this Qun text adopts the lifestyles, beliefs, and traditions of the Qunari. In return, those who practice the Qun are essentially considered Qunari themselves. So yes, a human could join Qunari society and live amongst them. And when a Qunari rejects the belief system of the Qun, they are excommunicated from that society. In a lot of ways, you could suggest that the Qun texts are a fantasy version of Muslim faith, but they also have Christian and other religious similarities as well. This does not mean the Qunari in Dragon Age are fantasy Muslims or black people. They are simply a fictional race that uses real-world concepts to form a compelling theme and backstory for the game in which they exist within. So to take what this Twitter user has said that has gone semi-viral on the internet, to blanket the existence of all people of color under this is not only ridiculous, but actually hurtful too. I also find it interesting that in their own post they say that a devil did something evil and so all his descendants for the rest of time are evil. You don't see the problem with categorizing a large swath of people as evil and calling them pejoratives based on their appearance or heritage. As if this isn't what many weirdos on the internet do when it comes to the treatment of white people, right? How many times have we seen online where white people are said to have no culture or they must pay reparations? Or their scores when trying to get into college or university are lower valued over other types of people. It's very interesting how these internet weirdos who push things like identity politics or insert here lives matter narratives and other political nonsense oftentimes openly admit their own racial biases without noticing it. The thing is that in terms of Baldur's Gate's world, or really the entirety of Dungeons & Dragons as a whole, of course there would be racism in a world like that. But your attachment to alluding that demon people are somehow automatically black people in this fantasy world is unfounded and downright moronic, not to mention it's kinda tone deaf. Because you can play a human character who is black, or really whatever color you want, and the characters are not racist towards you because you're black. Sure, some other race like an elf or tiefling and others may look at you and go, oh, you're one of those humans. But this simple example proves that it's not the color of your character's skin that dictates the racism of the world in which Baldur's Gate, or any other fantasy game really, takes place in. And that you're imposing your own biased, oftentimes racist beliefs onto a game, and coming to your own conclusions that only prove that deep down in your progressive mindset that you cherish so much, that you just might be racist yourself actually. Outside of Baldur's Gate 3's massive success, the actual company that owns the D&D IP has been doing a lot of moronic things that actually have been hurting the brand more than anything. A few months back, Wizards of the Coast actually declared that character biographies like half-elves or half-orcs were now deemed racist, with Wizards claiming the concept is, as they put it, the half construction is inherently racist. Frankly, we are not comfortable and haven't been for years with any of the options that start with half, says Jeremy Crawford, a D&D designer. Originally in D&D, you could choose these archetypes. You could be half-elf and human, or whatever you want really. And these combos would lead to unique traits and weaknesses, which makes sense since this is an RPG after all. But this push for what Wizards of the Coast believes to be a good thing to change is actually way more racist the longer you think about it. What they're suggesting is that the concept of mixed race people is racist, and that going forward Dungeons & Dragons should only embrace racial purity, as in you can only play full-blooded humans, elves, orcs, and so on. These New Age designers are pushing the fact that someone being of mixed cultures is essentially an abomination in their eyes. Something that shouldn't exist. Which, if you take 5 seconds to look at the world, especially if you live in Canada, America, or any first world country really, a bunch of people, myself included, are mixed race, so in D&D's official rules, me being Serbian and Armenian is not allowed. Because half of me is a Balkan white person and the other part of me is more Middle Eastern-like. What these woke designers and commenters like Liz on Twitter that sparked this conversation don't realize is that it's not the player base at large that is racist or full of microtransactions. By the way, I hate that term a lot. But anyway, it's actually the people pushing these changes that are more racist than those they challenge. Being a tiefling in Baldur's Gate is not living akin to a black person. Nor should playing an orc make you in any capacity believe they are fantasy African people. If you do think that way, surprise, that's probably racist. But it's interesting considering that many modern day game designers, writers, and annoying activists are always saying we should champion diversity and how we should speak out against racism. Yet the cold reality is that these very same people oftentimes are the very ones who only see the world strictly by race and gender themselves. I don't look at Lae'zel in Baldur's Gate and think, she's a black woman because she's an orc. And I don't look at Kunaris in Dragon Age and go, look, it's a huge Muslim person. Because not only do these comparisons make zero sense, but they are clearly racist as well. We should use fictional media to explore concepts like racism and depict examples of extreme racial tensions. Not in a hateful way, but because through video games it offers a safe space, which is another term that I hate. But it's true that gaming in general is a good place to explore these concepts so people can learn. Elves in Dragon Age, or even The Witcher, are also racially profiled and attacked by humans. I also really enjoy how games like Final Fantasy XVI, for example, depict slavery as well, because it doesn't tie the master and slave concept to skin color, but instead the markings on one's face instead. And in 16's world, slavery is designed to subjugate those who wield magic. as people who use magic are seen more like tools than actual human beings. And the more magic they use, their bodies slowly start to turn to stone, until the very life from their bodies are spent servicing the very masters who see them as beneath them. That's a really interesting idea for a story, and I'm glad that they did that. I also love how in Tales of Arise you have the slave race known as Danans, whose entire planet is under the rule of the Renans, who's another race that is far more technologically advanced and harvests the planet and abuses the Danans for their own gain. This leads to the main character in that game, whose name is Alfin, to be treated like garbage by many because he's not Renan. That's really interesting. I wouldn't look at Alfin or say Clive in Final Fantasy and go, oh, it's an allegory for black people, or whatever. Instead, it's a plot device used to create a believable world that is both interesting and relatable to many people. And let's not play stupid here either. It's not only black people that are treated with racist tendencies. I guarantee you if I went to a predominantly Indian country or somewhere like Nigeria, I would likely be met with tensions by some people who live there for my skin color. Not saying everyone there would be racist, but let's not play stupid and claim only white people are racist. Cause then not only are you uninformed, but you're admitting you're a moron too. So no, playing a tiefling, orc, or whatever else in a video game is not a microaggression, it's not racist, or is it designed to make white players have an easier time. You'd have the exact same experience as a person playing a white human character as you would a black character. You're being racially profiled because you're a humanoid demon with horns that has the blood of devils in them. Like you're telling me if our society had literal interdimensional offsprings with horns and fangs that nobody would be maybe a little uncomfortable around them? Come on now. Although if they did look like that, I would probably get one of those tieflings to marry me. But alas, this is not about me nor my fantasies, so just ignore this statement. Anyway, that's what I have to say on this. Now that racism is out of the way, let's now talk about sexism. Great, lovely. From Bounding into Comics, we have the article titled, Dragon Age lead writer David Gator blames misogyny for wide dislike of Baldur's Gate 3 companion Lae'zel. Fandom has always treated male characters with more forgiveness. I want to start this part off by saying that David Gator is really talented and I genuinely love his work on Dragon Age. And what he's saying here is kind of being taken out of context, but we'll get there. The general talking point here is that Gator claims players are usually more forgiving towards male party members over female ones in games, especially the ones Gator has worked on, like Dragon Age Origins 2 and Inquisition. He went on to say, can confirm the Dragon Age fandom consistently gave way more latitude and forgiveness to male characters, as opposed to female characters in every game. It is very much a thing. Where one user asked, true, but also I think the audience demographic was different back in 2009. You ever do interviews about working on Dragon Age Origins or the other entries, David? To which Gator said it was the same way for Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition, not just Origins. Fandom has always treated male characters with more forgiveness, full stop. But like I said, context here is important since Gator didn't say male players didn't give female characters less empathy, but players in general, as in female players too, didn't either. He ended by saying a few comments before I mute this conversation, I meant the entire fandom, not just the dudes. Yes, I get it's a generalization, but you personally liking a female character or disliking a male one 100% invalidates it. I don't think this was news to anyone, to be honest. So Gator clearly states here that it's both men and women that seem to have less patience for asshole female characters, which I find very interesting. Speaking as someone who's played the Dragon Age and Mass Effect games many times over, the female characters, especially in Dragon Age's case, are definitely more nuanced and layered, but in a great way. Morrigan, for example, is the ultimate goth girl witch lady, and she's really mean too. But she's also very sarcastic, funny, even when she's being condescending. You could make the same argument for Isabella in Dragon Age 2, who's kind of a loosey-goosey as she repeatedly sleeps with whatever she wants when she wants to. I remember one part of the game she even says she may have caught an STI recently. And in Inquisition, Cassandra, or hell even Liliana, are very cold at first and actually kind of openly dislike you before you get to know them. But I think that's what makes them really interesting as well. Lae'zel just seems to be cut from the same cloth as a Morrigan or Cassandra. She's your bullish, battle-hungry woman, but clearly she develops as she goes along. Plus, she's an orc for crying out loud. Of course she wants to kill stuff. The only other race I would allude an orc to is maybe a Krogan in Mass Effect. And not that they look anything alike, but Krogans, like orcs, just want to eat everything, headbutt whoever they dislike, and kill stuff because they like doing it. It's their racial trait, and it's awesome. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I love me a strong, dominant woman companion in a video game. Because as someone with a strong personality, I like the challenge in getting to know them and understand them. And like Gator said, women seem to hate the female characters more too. And listen, nobody's more mean to a woman than another woman. Any woman out there watching this knows exactly what I'm talking about. I worked in restaurants for years as a server, and as a male server, I would rarely, if ever, get any complaints. Barely anyone would question my work ethic or anything, but the female servers I worked with would be harassed, yelled at, and oftentimes touched inappropriately by patrons. These are societal biases that I'm fully aware of, but maybe the pushback to Lae'zel has less to do with her being a woman, and more so has to do with the fact that a lot of media today tends to write female characters as emotional as Terminators. While I'm not claiming Baldur's Gate does that, but I'm just saying these days when people are presented with a typical, on the surface, strong female character, people get skeptical immediately. Cause are we gonna get a strong female character in the vein of Ripley or Sarah Connor, or will they be more like, Captain Marvel or Rey? I would argue Lae'zel is more like the former than the latter, but that's what I think. But as for now, I think that's enough, so let me know what you think as always in the comments. Is Baldur's Gate racist and sexist? No. Are the people who only see race and sex in everything they consume racist and sexist? Absolutely. And it's hilarious to see it if I'm being honest with you. Anyway, like the video to help the channel out, subscribe if you like to, and have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. The only other race I would allude an orc to is maybe a Korean.